Hey everybody, how you doing? This is about to be a really fun video. So recently, I picked up a WBY slinger that flings these. If you have one, you might recognize what it is. If you don't, you might be like, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's a WBY because of the shoulder here. But this is a 300 WBY Magnum. In that video, oh my goodness, we sparked up tons of controversy because I called this the second most powerful 30 cal. Well, everybody and their uncle's monkey's brother came out of the woodwork to tell me that I was so wrong. And that's not the most powerful 30 cal. A lot of people said the 300 RUM. Well, a lot of the data that I showed that the difference between the 300 RUM, I'm actually going to show you one right here. The 300 RUM and the 300 WBY was kind of negligible. We put them side by side. Very similar numbers. You can see the cases are pretty close. If I didn't have them side by side, you might not be able to tell the difference. This is a RUM. This is a WBY. But there's a lot of books, a lot of data that says the difference is pretty much negligible between these two. And that's why I called the WBY the second most powerful, because a lot of books that I read said it was. But we're about to look at the data to talk about these. In this video, because a lot more people are more familiar with 300 Win Mag, that is what we're going to compare. 300 Win Mag, 300 WBY, 300 RUM, and 300 Norma. So I put Norma in there. Technically, yes, it is a factory load. Some bing bang manufacturers do make it. One in particular is a Barrett. They've got some pretty sweet long-range slingers, like their Mark 22 setup. If you never heard of that, go check it out. They do chamber it in 300 Norma. Yeah. But what I do have, I don't have a 300 Norma yet. They cost $1 bazillion. What I do have is a 300 Win Mag, the 300 WBY, and the 300 RUM. These all right here are actually loaded with the same 180 grain. Actually, I take that back. This 300 Win Mag is actually loaded with the 150, but I don't have the 180s. But we're going to talk about the data of the same boo lot loaded in all these. But believe it or not, Remington loads. It's no surprise I'm a Remington fan, right? Remington. I even got the shirt on today. Remington does load the Ultra Mag, the WBY Mag, and the 300 Win Mag. I have the data of the 180s, but all I have here at the house is the 150s. We're going to talk about all this data from a drop perspective and an energy perspective. If you watch the show, you've seen me do some of these before. But let's get right into the data. So what I tried to do was compare similar things. There's not a single company that loads all four of those. The Win Mag, the WBY Mag, the RUM, and the Norma. But there are a couple, like I just showed you. Remington loads the first three. Norma loads a couple of them. But the Norma Mag, Norma only loads one loading. And then I found a specialty shop that loads a different, it's more similar 180 grain weights, close to these. So let's just look at the data. So keep in mind, looking at these, what matters: ballistic coefficient and the initial velocity. Those are two key components to figure out these numbers, how much drop they have. So take note of the ballistic coefficient and the muzzle velocities. So we're just going to go right down it at any point in time, freeze the screen, look at the numbers. I triple checked all this stuff. There shouldn't be any errors in this. But first, let's look at the drop. So I did 2 of each loadings, or cartridge I should say that, just to have a little bit more data. So if you look at the 300 Win Mag, there's 2, 180 grain Remington core locked and the 180 grain Norma Bond Strike. Muzzle velocities about 100 feet per second off. Quite the drastic difference in ballistic coefficient. So you can see red means, when we're talking about the drop in inches, red means it drops the most at that yardage. Green means it drops the least. So top to bottom, you could just looking at all 4 of these different cartridges in 8 different loadings. 200 yards, the most drop is 3.2. The least amount of drop is 2 inches. 300 yards, the worst drop is a foot, and the least amount of drop is 8 inches. So we're still only worst to best 4 inches off at 300 yards. Go out to 500 yards. Now we're starting to see some pretty drastic changes where the worst is a 51-inch drop, almost 52, with the slowest 300 Win Mag. And then the best, which is the Norma mag, at 500 yards, only drops 33.4 inches. So, now, comparing the RUM versus the Weatherby, let's pause for just a second. So, let's go back to that 500 yards, and let's look at the second RUM, which is the Bond Strike 180 grain. At 500 yards, that drops 36.7 inches. Same distance at 500 yards, the Sirocco 180 grain drops 38 inches. So 2 inches difference in drop at 500 yards between the RUM and the Weatherby. That's with premium high BC bulots. Now, if I put the BC up of that Sirocco or that 300 Weatherby to the same as the 300 RUM, the Weatherby would overtake that RUM. So I've sat here this morning and looked at a bunch of numbers. The difference between 300 RUM and 300 Weatherby is negligible. 2-inch difference at 500 yards, but those don't have the same BC. Depending on how you're loading it, I'm only using factory numbers for this. Depending on what you're loading, the Weatherby can overtake the RUM. Depends on what bulot you load, what petters you use, all that stuff. But using factory loadings, the difference between the Weatherby and the RUM is pretty much negligible. The Norma, let's just look at Norma because it's kind of cool. So the one loading that Norma loads for the 300 Norma is a 230 grain projectile. By far heavier than anything else here we have. The difference in the drop isn't a big deal when you look at that Norma load, the 230 grain Norma load. There's actually a RUM on this chart that drops less than that Norma. But where it does make a big difference, if you load the 180 grain, so the same grain weight as everything else in this chart, that's that bright green on the bottom. If you load a 180 grainer, 3,300 feet per second, it drops the least, considerably less, all the way out to 1,000 yards. Next, I don't want to make this too much of a long, boring video, but next I have the same data from an energy perspective. And again, you can see here where muzzle velocity and ballistic coefficient really makes a difference. I have these 3 Remingtons in there, all in 180 grainers, where the BC is 0.383. You can see that on the chart there. Similar story, but where that 300 Norma really shines is the energy that 230 grainer carries out to long distances. So again here, let's just look at 500 yards. So let's look at 500 yards. You can see the Win Mag is the worst. The Weatherby is the second worst, if you want to call it that, in this comparison. Then the RUM takes second place. My phone's going off. And then the Norma. So all this being said, BC is a lot, means a lot in this equation when we're going out. When you go to do some long range stuff, you pick the highest BC stuff that groups well. High BC doesn't mean a hill of beans if it's not grouping well out of your bing bang. You know what I mean? But all that being said, I'm not going to bore you and try to run through my thoughts, but when it comes down to it, yes, the 300 Norma is king. Now, somebody's going to say, what about that Weatherby 378? Yes, that has a whole lot of power. But to me, never seen one in a store, never seen the ammo in a store. So it doesn't really count. It exists, but it doesn't really count. I only put Norma on here because I have seen it in the store, both the blue light slingers and the ammo. So it counts, you know. I could sit here right here in my desk and work up some kind of ridiculous hot stuff. But it's not stuff that's factory loaded. It's not stuff you're going to find at the store. So that's kind of irrelevant to 99% of the people that we're talking to here. So all that being said, you want to go back and study the drop. You want to study the energy. Everything in this list that I just showed you, pretty powerful. Pretty powerful than most people have. Pretty powerful than what most people hunt with, to be honest. But Norma's at the top, 300 Norma. Then the RUM on these numbers are slightly, ever so slightly, hairline above the 300 Weatherby. And then there's the 300 Win Mag, which is by far much more popular. In my opinion, main reason because it's a lot more available, it's a lot more affordable. If you could get a 300 RUM or a 300 Weatherby for just as cheap as 300 Win Mag, there'd be a lot more people with those too. In all my adventures and travels and everywhere I've gone, I've only come across one person hunting with the 300 RUM. Actually, only one person two people I've ever talked to that have a 300 RUM other than myself. The Weatherby's pretty popular in the hunting circles. More popular than the 300 RUM in the people that I've talked to. I've talked to more people that said they have a 300 Weatherby than have a 300 RUM. Some of that too might be the expense of the blue lots. If last time you had to look up 300 RUM, if you go anywhere in a store and try to find 300 RUM, I know because I buy it, it's over 100 bucks a box. You can actually get the 300 Weatherby mag ammo cheaper than the 300 Remington Ultra. Don't ask me why. I mean, part of it's what goes into it, right? The cases and it has a little bit more powder in it, case capacity. But some of it's supply and demand. There's just not as many people out there trying to get RUM stuff. They make less, so it costs more. There's less out there. You guys know how that works. Anyways, now I'm rambling. But hey, quick video comparing these mega powerful 300 calibers, 300 caliber loadings, cartridges. Lots of words. I'm rambling on now. But hey, wanted to put some of this on paper. A lot of you guys have been asking me about this week in particular. Obviously, there's tons of factory loadings out there for some of these, especially 300 Win Mag. But I just picked two for each one so we could have somewhat of a baseline to look at. But hey, appreciate y'all watching. Stay tuned for more. Thanks for subscribing. Comment down below what you want to see next time. Appreciate y'all big time. We'll see you on the next one. Hooty hoo.